Empires do not suffer emptiness of purpose at the time of their creation. It is when they've become established that aims are lost and replaced by vague ritual. Words of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan. Welcome to Reading Dune, a podcast where we are reading Dune Messiah by Frank Herbert and talking about it. If you're a Fremen or a first-time reader, this podcast is for you. My name is Caleb Pauls.
And I'm Evan Diaz.
And together, we're going to read some Dune.
Yeah, we are.
Evan, how you doing? How's the chapter going?
It's good. It was full of little moments, wasn't it?
It's full of so many little moments. Real quick, who is in this chapter?
Well, we got Paul.
Yeah.
We've got Chani, Stilgar, Alia.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Irulan, little sourpuss, and Korba, the Quizzara.
Yeah.
Quizzara, whatever. That guy.
We'll get into all that. It's a packed chapter for sure, and there's a lot of sass.
Oh, yeah.
It's so funny because when I'm reading this the first time, I don't think I realized how much sass is in it until it's like the second or third or fourth time I'm going through it now, where I'm like, it reminds me of, on Frank Herbert, on the last chapter, he like leans into the sardonic. That's a Frank Herbert word, right? The just irony and just stupidity of all of this. Like super hardcore in a serious way that you like look at it, you're like, wait, are they joking or are we serious? And that's how this chapter feels too. It's like, Frank, what are you doing? What's happening? So this is, as Andrew says here on YouTube, the whole cast is here and it's a loot.
It's a loot.
Grab your waters because this is gonna be a good one. Before we start though, Evan, we just launched the website, right?
We did.
We totally did.
ReadingDune.com.
What can you do at ReadingDune.com?
You can do a bunch of stuff. I mean, primarily you can buy merch, which I designed and I'm very proud of. And I need to buy some myself, actually. I need to practice what I preach and pay myself for some Reading Dune merch.
So we have not had many asks on the show. We are now into our second season in the second book, and I think it's appropriate now that I can ask. If you have liked the show and you've gained something from it, please go to readingdune.com. We have some cool merch. We got some we have t-shirts, we got mugs, we got some nice hats. The hats are currently of dad hats, corduroy dad hats that say "Stay Spicy" on it. It's our number one seller at the moment. It's really kind of funny. We also have a place where you can leave comments, and as much as I love reading comments on this show, obviously, this one comes from Jessica Stevens from the website.
From the website, like through the like contact thing on the website?
Yeah, she could have emailed us, but instead she was at the website and just put in her name and put it in there.
That's amazing. More of that.
Please. All right, readingdune.com, plug it one more time. So Jessica Stevens, she says, woo, merch order number 3. Then she got a mug. So she asked us if we would able to sign the mug, which I don't think we can do. So I'm very sorry about that, Jessica.
No, we can't.
But she says, love the podcast. You guys are so genuine and funny. I read Dune for the first time about 10 years ago. Been a huge fan ever since. I was also named after the Lady Jessica, so maybe that's just meant to be.
What? That's cool.
That's cool. Keep up the good work. Stay spicy, Jessica.
Thank you, Lady Jessica.
we unfortunately can't sign the mug, but another way to help support the show, I know, just one right after the other.
Wow, you're such a capitalist.
Thank you. You can go to Patreon, which is patreon.com/readingdune, and our highest tier at $30 a month, we will send you a copy of Dune Messiah that we have signed. I'm gonna go find one on eBay, a really cool vintage one, and we'll sign it and we'll ship it to you. And that's probably going to cost as much as you're going to pay us to do the first month, but that's why it's recurring. so yeah, that's what's going to happen. And what's happening with Reading Dune is we're, going out there.
Growing up.
Diana from YouTube here says, go get some spicy merch with 3 chili peppers.
Oh yes, there's not a lot of things quite as spicy as a corduroy hat.
It's very true.
I was pretty stoked when I made that one. Like, we can have a corduroy hat,
which is funny because Evan sent that to me, and then I was on Instagram, and then it was my wife showed me. She was like, "Look, these corduroy hats are so in style right now," and I was like, "Holy crap! Evan just designed one of those. We are so lucky."
Yeah.
I think it's worth talking about also Blitz Girl here on YouTube. By the way, if you're not watching live on YouTube, we want to hang out with you. If you're caught up, make sure you find us on YouTube, and you can literally watch the show. You can do the show with us pretty much.
Yeah.
You're an audience member, and we talk to you back and forth. So Blitz Girl says, "You too excited after the Oscars the movie won yesterday? Gives me big hopes for the sequels." Evan, do you know how many Oscars Dune won yesterday?
6? 6 out of 8?
Yeah, 6 out of 8.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty good. I mean, we didn't get the big ones.
Right. But, really good movies got some of them. And Dune still got 6 Oscars, which is a lot,
I mean, we got cinematography, film editing, sound design. Hans Zimmer woke up at 2 a.m. to receive his Oscar in his hotel room and thanked the guy that did the bagpipes. So I think that was worth it alone. And I mean, when we think about it, Fellowship of the Ring, nowhere. It got nominated for a lot, but it didn't win a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling Return of the King vibes. Maybe I'm just optimistic for the second one.
Maybe.
But.
Or the third one.
Or the third one. Bum, 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 bum. I know. I would just hate to see Jason Momoa show up again.
Kind of.
As a joke.
Green.
Okay. Yep. All right. Everyone who's a reader knew that one. All right. Moving on. All right. Let's dive into the chapter. Here we are. So, we are in the Arakeen Palace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Alia is now late to the meeting. She's rushing through the hallway. I picture it. It's like the back shot. She's walking her walk in, opens the door, seeing everyone sitting there. They're kind of arguing. And she's going to the Imperial Council. This is the top dudes everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
She opens the door and instantly feels the tension in the room. Irulan won't look at Chani. Stilgar is busy shuffling papers, waiting to start the meeting.
Which, by the way, what happened, Stilgar? How did you get here?
We'll get into that.
Now he's like a paper pusher kind of guy.
It's a straight bureaucrat. And Paul is scowling at Korba of the Quizera. And Alia has this thought. I have a bad feeling about this. Alia sits herself at the end of the Golden Council table. I think, purely speculation and Caleb's opinion here, this is a golden table. It's probably Irulan's father's table.
Ooh.
Which adds a whole other layer. This is the Imperial Council table.
Yeah. Well, they had it flown into Arakeen.
He won. He said, "Hell yeah, give it to me. I want the frickin' table.
Give me that table."
Korba was interrupted by Alia's entrance and goes back to telling something to Paul. What I mean, my lord, is that there aren't as many gods as there once were. Alia hears that and throws her head back laughing. At this motion, her black Abba hood fell off, exposing her deep blue within blue eyes.
Well, she was like super spiced up
I
as
think
a
there's
fetus, right?
yes.
So she definitely has blue eyes.
He definitely has blue eyes. She looked a lot like her mother. So how old do you think Alia is at this point?
It says, I think it says she's 15,
Yeah.
right? At some point, Paul says which is how old Paul was at the beginning of the first book.
Good connection.
So kind of a parallel there, and helps me understand like kind of where she's at, because she's 15, yeah, but also she's a million years old because she's got like every Reverend Mother, like every Reverend Mother before her adds another however many years of life they had to her age. Right?
We can joke that some kids are old souls. She's literally 1,000 old souls in one.
Right.
So she's laughing at Korba. Korba is glaring at her like an angry gnome, bald and fuming.
Love it.
Those are Frank's words, not mine. Do you know what is being said about your brother? Korba demanded. Alia responds, I know what's said about your Quizarot. You're not divines, you're God's spies.
Oh!
Korba looks back at Paul for support. We were sent by the writ of Muad'Dib, that he shall know the truth of his people, and they shall know the truth of him.
But Dad...
Right, we were sent by you so everyone will know you. Alia's like, spies. Come on. Paul just looks at Alia, wondering why Alia needs to push Korba's buttons. But now, Paul saw Alia, quote unquote, not as the little girl anymore, but she's now passed into womanhood. Right? She's 15, almost 16, a legit Reverend Mother.
Right.
Without motherhood, she is the prototypical virgin priestess. She's the object of fearful veneration, and the masses are just obsessed with her. She is Alia of the Knife. You remember the first time we saw Saint Alia of the Knife?
Yeah.
I was like,
I mean, it was, I don't remember specifically, but it was a while back in the first book, right?
Yeah. It was like the third chapter. We get talking about the tension between a Reverend Mother versus a woman in her youth, and that tension in between.
Yeah.
Which is weird for this little girl to talk about. She's 15, but then again, she does have every single Reverend Mother in her.
Yep.
Talking to her constantly. Talking about having weird voices in your head all the time. Moving on. Irulan makes a comment at Alia. This is not the time or place for your sister's levity. Paul hears Irulan, but ignores her because that's her role.
Yeah, I kind of want to imagine Alia going, you know, like,
right. And Paul's like, okay, moving on. He nods to Korba and then says that the square is full of pilgrims. Like, I know that you just said that I should know the truth of my people. All of these people are coming to see me. You should go out and lead the prayer. Korba protests. Oh, but they expect you. Paul says, put on your turban. They'll never know. Which I love. Irulan is fuming because she's been ignored. The princess does not ever be ignored, and here she is being ignored all the time. But she's constantly wondering, is Edric hiding her plans from the sister too? Because, I mean, come on, Alia is also prescient.
Mm-hmm.
So, sure, we made it hide it from Muad'Dib, but what about the sister, who is equally just as dangerous?
Is she? Do we know that? Like, not she doesn't know that. Do we know that, like the readers?
Yeah, it's safe to assume for you that she's ultimately very dangerous.
Okay.
She's arguably more dangerous because this happened to her when she was so young, and how the masses remember how she was like a demon child in the Sietch?
Yeah.
Yeah, now she's a priestess, virgin, goddess, warrior person. Like, it's a whole
Fair
other
enough.
level.
Yeah. Okay.
So during this, Chani now has her hands clasped in her lap. She's like squeezing her hands really hard. And she's staring at Stilgar, who is her uncle.
Right.
And is now Paul's minister of state. He is the guy. And she wonders, as he's shuffling his papers, does he long for a simpler life back in the desert? Because I know that's what she's thinking. Like,
Right.
this is so annoying. If we could just go back to recycling our water and not giving a crap about anything, that'd be great. Stilgar could feel Chani looking at him, so he looks away. He just doesn't acknowledge it. And he sees Korba now outside with his hands raised over his head for the benediction as the masses are just swelling in this moment.
You know what I kind of pictured?
Yeah, what's picture?
When in Two Towers? Yes, in Two Towers, The Lord of the Rings, Two Towers. When
the movie, right?
Yeah, when Grima Wormtongue is in what's it, Isengard with Saruman, and he's like talking about like, oh, there's no gigantic army, and he's like, I got a gigantic army, and he goes on the balcony, and there's like tens of thousands of orcs,
right,
outside of the balcony or whatever, and he does like the big speech.
Yeah,
that's kind of what I was picturing, but like less Mordory, less
right,
like dark and spiky and orky.
But, yeah, more of like dirty pilgrims and a religious power.
Right.
I think about like the Pope sometimes does this, right? In the like Vatican Square, and that kind of thing. So Korba has his hands over his head, and the afternoon sun is shining on his hands as the sun is probably going down. So it's creating this halo effect around him, on the wall behind him. The pilgrims are seeing now their Muad'Dib, which is really Korba, their Muad'Dib leading them in prayer with the illusion that he's being crucified on a fiery wheel of death. It also kind of looks like a worm, right? Korba drops his hands. Benediction ends, returns inside. The balcony doors seal behind Korba as he returns to his seat to the left of Paul. Paul could see Korba was enjoying this moment of intense religious power. And so he leans over to Korba and says, the spirit presence has been invoked. And then Alia quips in, thank the Lord for that. Woo!
Wait. Did Paul say that first line, or did Korba say that first line? I thought Korba said it.
Wait, read it. What does it say? I could have missed it.
Well, he'd enjoyed that moment of religious power. Talking about
that what just happened, yeah.
And then the spirit presence has been invoked. That sounds like Korba saying something fancy after he just like did that, you know?
It's like the amen to the amen.
Right. And then Alia's like, oh, the spirit presence has been
the little 15-year-old girl is making fun of you in the corner.
Idiot. You're an idiot.
Korba is fuming, but not doing anything. Paul wonders about Alia, looking at her like, what the fuck, Alia? What are you doing?
Why are you picking on Korba right now?
We need him. Paul knew that he was a freak and knew that Alia was like a whole other level.
Yeah.
And she also had that Quizrat Hatterack genes too. But she was pre-born, right? During the water of life, both her and her mothers became Reverend Mothers simultaneously. Alia says that experience, that in one terrifying, insane moment, she had awakened to consciousness, her memory absorbing the uncounted other lives which her and her mother was assimilated. Alia could feel Paul looking at her. She returned his gaze and just smiled. That awkward little sister smile. Stilgar taps his papers. I have papers. These are important. This is what we're here to do. He says, these are urgent. So we're going to go through the list of all the important things the council has to deal with today. First one, right off the bat. So Stilgar says the guild wants Paul to sign a treaty saying he will not expose the location of the rebel base, which is called Tupile Intante.
Okay.
Which I just love that.
The rebel base.
Tell me where the rebel base is. It's just very Star Wars-esque of
Yeah.
but now we're on the other side. And Paul could, if he wanted to, find it. But the guild's like, please don't do that. So the guild wants to operate and shuttle people back and forth to the rebel base without Paul knowing.
So they're asking his permission?
Yeah. Don't
Seems
go
weird.
looking for it.
Seems weird.
It's a treaty. We're going to keep the peace here by letting that happen. Irulan pipes up. She says, let's just not give the guild spice anymore. But she says, my lord husband to Paul, so maybe he'll finally recognize her.
Which also to like throw shade at Chani a little bit.
Right. Like she's right. It's in the room. She's always in the room.
My lord husband.
Dun dun dun.
Little stare, little spicy stare at Chani.
Yeah. So, which I also think this is funny. She just says, let's just deprive them of spice, which whose argument was to deprive everyone of spice?
It was Paul's originally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So she's throwing his own argument back at him after 12 years.
Right.
And Paul just rolls his eyes. He finds this whole thing petty. But, of course, what is Irulan but just a Bene Gesserit pawn? Chani's now just shaking her head at Irulan. Stilgar warns, if they could hide people, they could hide things, or a secret army, or even start another spice cycle somewhere else. Which is funny, because that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Right? They're trying to get a worm to start another spice cycle. Alia and Paul both know if they want to keep the peace, they can't chase their enemies into a corner. Right? Because as Duncan Idaho would tell you, people are unpredictable when they're in the corner. That's when they are the most dangerous. Don't do it.
Right.
So Irulan stands up and spews out that if they don't know where the rebel base is, they've spent the last 10 years of negotiation for nothing. The 15-year-old in the room, Alia, responds, none of my brother's actions are for nothing.
You tell him. Alia.
Irulan sits back down, grabs her pen, and squeezes it as tight as she can until she starts white-knuckling it. Paul looks at Irulan and can almost hear her repeating the litany back and forth to herself in her head. I must not fear. The fear is the mind killer.
Yeah.
I must not fear. Fear is the mind. And she's like white-knuckling her pen.
She's just like trying to stay as calm as possible and just writing stuff down like she's supposed to.
Yeah.
Which is funny. And we were talking about this before, Caleb, about how we read all of those things from Irulan in the first book, and they were all just like so honorable and like the Muad'Dib did not blah, 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 and it was like very, I don't know, talking about Paul in this very romantic religious way, but now we see her physically writing it and she's just like pissed off all the time. You know, like every time she's like writing something down, she's like, but then like the angry scribbles that she was making ended up being like the quotes that we got in the first book that were also like,
the beginning is a delicate time.
Right.
To keep all the balances are correct. She's like scribbling it down in pure anger. So Alia says they have to keep the confrontation down. There's already been too much blood that's been spilled under the Atreides banner, which Paul is shocked at this. Oh, yeah. She feels it too. And then he starts spiraling, like in his head. We must protect them from themselves. Was all the sacrifice worth it to ensure a bright future? Maybe a future where people would say, but for Muad'Dib, you would not be here. Like he's still trying to rationalize in his head. This was all good, right? I did the right thing.
He's still trying to figure out. It's like, can I come out of this as a good guy?
Yeah. He's spiraling in his head constantly. And now Chani speaks up. Denying them the melange would solve nothing. Paul then says, I'll sign the treaty as is. Stilgar questions Paul. My lord, you have certain powers? Can't you just find them with your powers, despite the guild? Which, I mean, I think is an honest question.
Right, but also, look at Stilgar tiptoeing. He's never been one to tiptoe before, and suddenly he's like, don't you have some, I don't know, abilities to maybe perhaps somehow, but Stilgar, he could have been like, could you see the future and like do something about it?
No, he has to like, but I what can you see? What can't you see? I'm
right,
confused.
he's been changed by the politics of the Imperium.
Yes,
which is sad because this is Stilgar, like
yes,
the Fremen guy that we met in the first book.
Yes. So Paul, after hearing this, just looks down at the golden table, probably looking at his own reflection because it's probably a shiny table. And he's thinking, how can I explain this? The limits of the inexpressible. He looks up to Alia like, help, what do I say? But Alia is staring at Irulan. Alia feels this Paul staring at her. And she looks at him, nods, at the blonde Bene Gesserit spy in the whale fur writing everything down. Like, be careful what you say. She's right there. If he says anything, she'll pass it on to her Reverend Mother Superiors. So Paul has to give an answer, right? He's got to tell Stilgar something. So of course you say, this is a quote at the beginning of a chapter. This is what this feels like.
Yeah.
The uninitiated try to conceive of prescience as obeying a natural law. Right? He makes his hands into a little steeple and says, but it's be just as correct to say as it's heaven speaking to us. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Does a chip caught in the wave say where it's going? Blah, 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 blah. Right? It's just a big esoteric statement of the philosophical to which all of us reading this say, what?
Yeah. I think I underlined one of the sentences in his whole spiel that I think are the point of what he's talking about. He said, but such powers cannot be used from an attitude that prestates aims and purposes. Basically, if you're trying to look into basically what I'm reading here is like, if you're trying to look into the future, but you're doing it with the intention of finding something specifically out, you're not going to find that specific thing out, or the whole thing just kind of falls apart.
It's like when you say something with using a lot of math terms to say nothing at all.
Right.
Like you sound super smart. But it's like, yeah, that's what he gets to at the end. If he's not looking for, like, you can't try to look for him and find him.
Right.
So Stilgar says, so you can't do it?
Right, dude. So I've been like marking up this book, and I literally just wrote, so like,
right. So yeah, so or
you
no?
Can't do it, or where are you at with being able to do it?
So of course Paul then just says, if I'm trying to find Tupile, it might hide Tupile from me.
Right.
At this, Irulan protests, screaming at her notes because she's trying to make sense of all of this, and says it has no consistency. Because she's trying to take notes to report back to the Reverend Mothers of how prescience works, because they're trying to figure it out, because they're trying to make a Kuzar counteract could bring balance to the Force and the world.
The Force, yeah.
So And so Paul just looks at her and said, I did say it obeys no natural law.
Right. Like she just has this little outburst. And Paul's like, I just said that. Yeah. Come on. Keep up.
So Irulan tries to say something, but then Alia cuts her off, saying, how can my brother give you explicit info about something that has no limits? The boundaries escape the intellect. Paul now looked down at Korba, who was enraptured with this whole scenario. He's completely in another religious awe.
Right. Korba's just like waving his arms in the corner, muttering in tongues to himself. Just because Paul's spiel was so
esoteric and philosophical
so,
and religious.
So meta that he's like having a spiritual experience.
So Stilgar's like, so you will sign the treaty? Paul
Can
smiles.
we just get back to work?
Paul smiles and is like, yeah, I'll sign it. All right. Done. Next issue. Stilgar brings up that the Ixian Confederation will submit, but they're asking for a constitution. And some of the houses of the Lanzarat are in on this as well. So the Ixians are now a new people that have just recently been conquered by the Jihad. Thank you, the Wild Yeehaw, to bringing the world back into order. And the Ixians are cool with it, but they want a constitution. Maybe some representation. Why does the Emperor have so much power? And some of the Lanzarat are like houses are like, yeah, we can get in on this. Paul thinks to himself, finally, the Jihad falters. But then again, dun 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 dun, thinks of all the bloodshed and the terribleness that has happened in his name and send him down a spiral again. Chani and Irulan both agree, which is weird, but they agree that they could trick everyone into thinking that the Constitution was real, but it's actually fake. It's really just serving all the same interests. And then Korba asks, which is probably my favorite line in the whole book, could it be a religious constitution? Like he's so enraptured. It's like, okay, but could we at least be religious about it?
And this is where Paul treats Korba like Meg from Family Guy. He's like, no, shut up.
No, Meg. Who let you back in the house?
In the kitchen, Meg.
And then he's like, no. And then we'll make an order in this council. Are you recording this, Irulan? And Irulan's like, yes, my lord. And then
suddenly she's like the scribe, the like note taker for this group project that they're doing right now.
Right. And she does it. She wants to be the head, but she's stuck being the note taker. That's her only job. All right. So here's the quote that Paul says. We might need to break this down because Frank likes politics. Yeah. All right. Constitutions become the ultimate tyranny. Their organized power on such a scale as to be overwhelming. The Constitution is a social power, mobilized, and it has no conscience, and can crush the highest and the lowest, removing all dignity and individuality. It has an unstable balance point and no limits. I, however, have limits. In my desire to provide the ultimate protection for my people, I forbid a constitution, order and council to this date, etc., etc. All right. What do you think, Evan, as an American citizen with a constitution, do you think he's talking about?
I think that I have no idea what he's talking about.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Zero, dude. Because I was just, I'm a citizen of two countries, both of which have constitutions, and I'm like, what's wrong with constitutions? My teachers all said they were great. I'm completely just ignorant to this like aspect of like political theory, so I'm just a dummy right now.
All right, well, this gets my juices going because as my bachelor's is in political theory, for some odd reason why I decided to do that, I don't know. I have not used that ever since, except talking about Dune in this moment. So this whole moment is maybe worth $30,000 of my undergrad.
Yeah.
democracy on a whole other level, basically saying that if mob rule happens, it doesn't matter. They'll crush everybody. They'll crush the high, they'll crush the low. There is no guarantee, no stop gaps, no checks and balances. He then says, I, however, have limitations, which I just need to call into question real quick. He's the Quizratch Hatterack. He's putting limits on himself. And do we trust somebody who can check themselves over mob rule? I don't know. I think he just wants to tell them no and needs an excuse. But I also know that Frank is trying to say something here, that democracy can, when ruled by the mob, in small local things, can swing to the left and to the right very drastically. And it can swing like a pendulum, and it can get too high and without living in the middle where it should.
Yeah. But, you know what this reminds me of?
What does this remind you of, Evan?
Fight Club.
What's the first rule of Fight Club?
That's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
The whole thing where like Tyler Durden says stuff and you're like, oh man, that's true. But then also that's super grim and not the kind of person I want to be, you know? That's kind of what this reminds me of, is like Paul is saying something, or maybe even Frank is saying something about the nature of democracy and the idea of a constitution, that you're like, that's a good point, but also like, you know, like what?
Right. Yeah. And I think
what do I do with that?
We have to just take that. And we'll get into a lot more politics as we see this whole chapter is political and the back and forth. Democracy, which I think is a also good point. They're looking for a ruling power that they just want written rules down, hopefully to give more power away from the ruling monarch, which would be Muad'Dib. But it is a valid point that constitutions do not equal democracy. Yeah. So someone asked about of course, the Ixians are concerned on a constitution because, for what reason? Taxes. The only reason we really care about constitutions is taxes.
That's why we wanted one, right?
Yeah. Paul says, yeah, whatever. They'll pay for the guild to transport. I don't really care. No constitution. Next item. Dun, dun, dun. The Quizrat are reporting on Seleucus Secundus that Irulan's father has been putting his legions through landing maneuvers.
Uh-oh.
So after the fall of the emperor, he went back to Seleucus Secundus, the worst possible place to go, and he's now put in charge of the little army there, and he's probably running them through maneuvers to feel something. He's just getting him out of the bed in the morning. So, yeah. Paul questions.
You don't think he's like trying to be sneaky and get them ready for an invasion or something?
Yeah, okay. Who? How? This is that whole question in that whole thing.
Right.
Like, it's just one battalion. He can't do anything with it. Alia suggests that, well, she knows some commanders who would gladly go kill the former emperor just for thinking about this.
And Irulan says, no, Daddy, no.
Yeah. She suggests that some in the Empire may look back on her father's reign with some nostalgia. Chani is now fuming, yelling at Irulan. And finally, Paul is like, enough! And once again, Irulan proved her worth. The line about nostalgia was partially true. So, action item, do nothing. Next item. The Bene Gesserit went to formally ask Paul about the preservation of his bloodline. They spent a lot of years and a lot of hard work and a lot of manipulation to get to this point, and they want to make sure their investment is secure.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm disappointing you because you manipulated literally everyone to make me.
Literally everybody. So at this, Chani gets nervous, and she side-eyes the papers as if the papers just offended her. And then Paul says, yeah, give the Bene Gesserit the usual excuses. I don't care. But then Chani pipes up, says, maybe it's time to consider. Paul cuts her off. Then Chani cuts him off. She will not be stopped. She says that she's been even going to prayer walls in Stjet's bar and gone to doctors. And Paul's like, everything is failing you. Religion's failed you. Science has failed you. Have I failed you also? What does it mean to bring another Atreides into the world? And what does that mean for the universe?
Right.
There's currently 2 of them at this table, and they're both psycho freaks. What happens if we bring another one in?
Right.
Like, golly. Who knows what the universe will do if there's 3 of them?
Right.
What are the Bene Gesserit going to do? What's the guild going to do? What's all these people? All right, okay, moving on. All right, who's to know? Irulan sees the tension in the room and decides now's her time. And says if Paul can't produce an heir, there will be civil strife among the houses and among the people. Paul then pushes away from the golden table, walks up, and goes to the balcony. The sun has now gone down, and it's about dusk. There's a silvery blue reflected off the shield wall. Everyone is watching him, and he's watching outside. He's just looking down. Everyone is also aware how close to rage he was over this whole discussion. This is like probably in every other day discussion too, and he's tired of talking about it. Right. For 12 years.
Yeah.
But Paul could feel time rushing in upon him. Disengage, 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 he thought. Which I think is interesting. When was the last time we saw the disengage pop up?
I mean, it was just the last time we saw Paul.
Yeah, last time we saw Paul, the terrible purpose was creeping in his head saying disengage, disengage. So he's having these recurring thoughts that he just needs to leave.
Right.
And it's just leave. So he thinks, maybe I could run away with Chani to the rebel base. Leave all this behind.
Right.
Now we get some exposition here of what's happening in the religion and the pilgrims and what's happened in the last 12 years. He looks down and sees the white and green pilgrims of the Hajj in the square below him. He remembers the Hajj.
What's the Hajj?
They're the Fremen would say in the last book they talk about they were denied the Hajj. It's the pilgrimage to visit the holy place where they can be together. Oh. Now the entire universe does the Hajj, and where do they go? Arrakis.
Yeah.
He remembers how right now the reception hall is going to be packed with pilgrims. This quote-unquote exercise in homelessness had become a disgusting source of wealth for the Imperium.
Yeah.
Which is also a little grotesque. Because he's thinking, did I set this in motion? What did I do?
Right.
And the pilgrimage ends here on Arrakis, right? It goes all over the known Imperium, going to all the spots where all the jihadi wars happened, and it ends on Arrakis, the place of rebirth.
So to do the pilgrimage, you have to pay for all of that transportation.
Right.
To all of these different places that eventually winds up in Arrakis, and then you got to get back home. So like basically all of those people traveling that much is creating so much money in the economy.
Right. And they need spice to do that. Where's the spice come from?
From Arrakis. So they're just making bank in every possible way.
Uh-huh. Dang. Off the exploits of the people thinking it's a religious experience to come here.
Right.
A place to die. People come here to die.
Dang.
Which snide old Fremen just say that Paul started the pilgrimage so he could get their water. People come die here, we'll just take their water and we'll use it. But Paul wants to know, what do the pilgrims actually want? Right? They came here because Arrakis is supposed to be the place of unknown, where all mysteries are explained. That somehow this was the link between their universe and the next. And the frightening part for Paul is that most of the pilgrims left feeling satisfied.
Right. So they actually got something out of it.
Right. It's like, I'm going to trick you this whole time into coming here and you're going to leave satisfied. And he feels awful about it. Like this, disgusted almost.
Right. I mean, sounds familiar. But some people would be happy about it and not feel, upset or conflicted.
You could say there would be a certain social class that benefits tremendously from this happening.
Right. I'm also talking about parallels in the real world, but we don't have to get into that right now.
Nah, this is already 45 minutes long. Everywhere there is peace, Paul thought. Everywhere but the except in the heart of Muad'Dib.
So Paul goes emo for a second.
Yeah. Somebody said this wasn't a rom-com. Here we are.
Right. I'm just a kid and life is a nightmare.
All of a sudden, Paul feels Chani slide her hand into his. He looks at her. Sihaya, he whispered. And she says, please, we must go to the desert soon. She takes him. They return back to the table. The meeting continues. She sits down, Paul still standing. Paul says, Irulan proposes herself as the mother of the Imperial heir, and we all know that she holds no love for me. Irulan won't look at him, and also won't move.
Right.
Paul continues, I know all the political arguments, but as matters stand, I reject the proposal. Irulan took a deep, shaky breath. Paul sits down, saying, he finally looks at Irulan. Irulan, I am truly sorry. She looks up at him. Her eyes are filled with pure fury. She says, I don't want your pity. I don't want your pity.
Starts writing again.
Irulan then growls at Stilgar. Is there more that's urgent and dire? Like, let's move on. So, next piece of business. Stilgar looks at Paul. The guild again proposes a formal embassy here on Arrakis. Korba speaks up again. We hear from him. One of the deep space kind? Korba then goes on how none of the Fremen will ever have one of these guildsmen on the ground because they remember how this whole oppression got started and won't allow it. Right? The Fremen were selling to the guildsmen. They were selling spice behind everybody's back. The guildsmen that set this whole thing up have been oppressing them. They pretty much, they could think they sent the Harkonnens via the Emperor, like all these different things. But then Paul snaps at Korba again. Enough! Do you think I have forgotten Muad'Dib, the Kwisatz Haderach, who can be all places at once, who knows everything? I forgot what it was like? Really? As though he just awakened, Korba heard what he was implying and stuttered almost unintelligibly. My lord, forgive me. I didn't mean to imply you are not Fremen. Paul says, they'll send a steersman. Irulan is then suddenly full of fear. You've seen a steersman come here? Her hand goes to her mouth. You've seen a steersman, Genji? Paul mocks her. Of course I haven't seen a steersman. But I can see where one has been and where one is going. Let them send a steersman. Perhaps I have use for one. Stilgar says, so ordered. A smile creeps on Irulan's face, hidden behind her hands. She thought, it's true then. Our emperor cannot see a steersman. They're mutually blind. The conspiracy is hidden. Bum, bum, bum. Yep, there we go. End of chapter 5.
Wow.
I feel like we got a lot of petty conversations. We kind of know where everyone in the room stands, where their relationships are. Mm-hmm. How much Paul is an emo kid. How
for life
snarky Alia is. How pissed off Irulan must be at all times. Stilgar feels like a shell of a man that he once was.
Yeah, that's sad.
And Chani, I just feel sad for. I feel broken for her.
Yeah, but she still manages to be a badass.
Always.
You know, like Irulan saying stuff, and she's like, one day you're gonna say something that will go too far, which is like, oh, kind of a really harsh threat,
And then I will kill you, straight up. Ugh. All right. Well, thank you so much for going through chapter 5 of Dune Messiah with us. Also, please go to the website, what is it again? Oh, yeah.
readingdune.com.
readingdune.com.
Easy to remember.
Make sure you follow us on Twitter, send us an email, and we just want to hear from you, see what's happening, and share this with a friend who's also very stuck in Dune Messiah, because I know it can be a lot. That's why we have the show.
Yep.
And we're going to be in Discord right after this to talk about all our feelings.
Yeah.
As if these last 51 minutes were not enough.
So if you haven't joined the Discord, go join the Discord. There's a link in the description there. So.
Yeah. Go join the Discord where if we talk about all the books, Evan is not in those chats. But if you need somebody to talk to, there's a bunch of people in there that can answer a lot of questions. So with that, please stay spicy, and I'll see you next chapter.
Peace.
Peace.